Today on Locked On Canadiens, Juraj Slafkovsky makes the Olympics, and we talk about some early draft slide candidates that probably won't make it to Montreal, but let us dream and think about what might happen if they did.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Every day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast 5 days a week. There is no off season for us here at Locked On Canadiens, so if you are joining us today, thank you for spending your time with us. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian, former host of the Build podcast, former editor-in-chief at rabidhabs.com, and I guess current co-host of Locked On Canadiens. We'll see how long they let me keep doing this. And I am joined, as I always am, by the wonderful Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. You know her from Habs Eyes on the Prize and her hockey primetime days way back in the day. I remember listening to hockey primetime. I was definitely one of those guys. Laura, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Olympic preliminary rosters are out. It feels like a newsy day, right?
Yeah, it's kind of nice. We're at a point in the season where we're getting like slow dripped news every once in a while. The occasional, ooh, this guy's available. Ooh, maybe offer sheet. Where's Mitch Marner going? And then like, here's a bunch of Olympic guys. So we get to talk about Olympic guys today, which is kind of nice. So we'll start there. We'll start with Slafkovsky being named to the Olympic roster. Talk about maybe some Canadians who weren't named as preliminary players who might end up on rosters before we know it. And we want to get into our draft prep a little bit. There are some slide candidates that we want to take a look at for the Montreal Canadiens. Some who we think have no shot, but because the numbers bear it out that there's a chance, we're going to talk about them. So let's start at the Olympics, though. The NHL, I guess it wouldn't be the NHL, but each of these teams, each of the teams in the tournament have been releasing their rosters. And one Montreal Canadian was named as a preliminary roster member. That is one Juraj Slafkovsky with Slovakia. He joins Martin Pospisil, Simon Nemec, Martin Ferivari, Eric Cernak, and one Thomas Tatar. Good to see Thomas Tatar still hanging around in these conversations. What was your first thought when you saw Juraj Slafkovsky named to that preliminary roster?
You know, I didn't doubt it. I know there was a lot of question marks because of how critical he's been of the Slovak system. I really do think that when push comes to shove, when it is such a big market tournament, when it is, like literally the pinnacle of pinnacle, like the best players from around the world playing against each other, there was no way that they were going to leave Juraj Slafkovsky off because he is one of the best players originating from that country, right? So At the end of the day, whatever political like differences that they have or philosophical differences or arguments, he's called them out, right? Like he's definitely made it hard for them to kind of make this a difficult pill to swallow, but his talent is undeniable. And the way that he shows up in big moments is undeniable. We saw it in the tournaments he's played in the past. We saw it in the very brief playoff run that he had in his NHL career, right? So this is a guy that's an absolute no-brainer. And I think that this is the thing is that this is the way you have to perform in the play. Like there's so many teams, and we're going to talk about that in a second. There's so many countries, so many teams that overthink this roster selection. You just take the best players available to you, period. That's it. Take the best players. That is literally what the Slovakian hockey program did. And I'm not at all surprised. I think, Juraj Slafkovsky has the ability to be a game changer in some of those big moment games.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the criticism that he levied at Slovakian hockey. This was before the season started. I have his quotes. It was in the Athletic before the season started, and this is from Juraj Slafkovsky himself. The Slovak Hockey Federation. A couple of things have to change for us there to be successful again, because I feel we got the Olympic bronze medal in 2022, and people got satisfied with these things. But that was lucky because there was no NHL players. Let's be honest, we wouldn't have won that medal if everyone had their full squad. But we got satisfied by these little things. We think we're doing things the right way, but we're not. We're just pretending. And we are trying to sell it to the people that we're doing things the right way by way of pushing these fake results. Obviously, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me that I won the Olympic medal, but be honest about it. I think that while Slovakian hockey probably had to hold their nose a little bit while they announced this, they probably didn't love the fact that they have to do this, but he is the most high-profile Slovakian hockey player in the world right now. I also think, isn't that the kind of guy you would want on that team? With that quote, like, he wants
He
more for
cares.
this country. He wants more for
Yeah.
that team. Like,
He
he
cares.
doesn't think he cares so much. And also, like, from a Slovakian hockey standpoint, if they underperform, and especially if Slafkovsky underperforms, they can go, see, I mean, it's not just our fault. You didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I feel like they can kind of be like, okay, you're right. It's your turn. Like, you were an MVP before. Go do it again.
Put your
I
money
hope
where your
it's
mouth
MVP
is.
again. Right, exactly. I do think that he's going to bring it in that tournament. I think he loves the bright lights. I think he loves the international stage. I am worried just though that roster won't be super great, and it'll sort of have to be the Juraj Slafkovsky show, and we'll have to see. That's the great thing about the Winter Olympics for Juraj Slafkovsky is it's right when second half Slav takes off, baby. Like that's his time. It's going to be February of 26. That's when Juraj Slafkovsky goes, it's time for me to power up and become the guy that I know I can be. So hopefully he's full season Slav. Hopefully.
Yeah.
But we have that. Last thoughts on Juraj Slafkovsky, because I want to talk about the rest of the roster for the Canadiens and see who we think is going to make these teams.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any last thoughts on Slafkovsky? Or ready to just jump into
I
those?
thought you were about to.
No. I've said enough.
Okay, so it's just like for me, like you said, it's going to be the Slav show, and just because like Slovakia might underperform overall in the tournament, it will be because there are so many other extremely talented rosters that are going. I think that's the thing, is that if they don't have the same showing as they did last time around, it's just because the top players from a lot of countries, the rosters are just much deeper. That's my last thought on Slafkovsky.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. All right, let's do some rapid fire here.
Yeah.
And talk about the rest of the Canadiens and whether or not we think they have a shot at going to the Olympics. Let's start with Nick Suzuki.
Yes.
You think he's there?
I think he's long listed, but I think ultimately it's going to be another situation just like the Four Nations, where he just gets dropped off and we have a lot of question marks. But I do think that he still has a chance, right? Because last season he played really well, but he really turned it on in the second half. And I think that he has the ability in October, November, and December, which is literally the time frame that Doug Armstrong talked about. He has the opportunity to turn it on. I think the advantage that Nick Suzuki has over other guys, like let's say a Tom Wilson, et cetera, is that Tom Wilson last year had a career year, right? But that was 1 year in a very long career. Whereas Nick Suzuki has evidence of progressing, like and being excellent every season. Like Nick Suzuki does not turn it off, so that is a chance in his favor. I believe he'll be on the long list. I believe he'll get the calls to go to the team meetings and all of that, to go to Calgary for whatever it is that they do. But ultimately, I do think it's going to be one of those decisions where we're like, they took that guy instead of him.
I think he makes it. I think Nick Suzuki is an Olympian next year. And the reason I say that is because, the guys that he'll be up against, the Robert Thomases, the Mark Scheifele will be in that conversation. The coward Mark Scheifele will be in that conversation. Robert Thomas can play a lot of the way that Nick Suzuki does. Mark Scheifele, I don't think, has the defensive acumen that Suzuki could. And if you're getting a guy like that, they're playing in your bottom six, you could put Nick Suzuki out as a fourth line center on Team Canada and just watch him go off. I think that's totally within the realm of possibility. Let's check in on two undersized Americans, Cole Caufield and Lane Hutson. Any shot that they're making this team?
I honestly think it depends on how they come out of the gate. There are a lot of really talented U.S. players. I think, in the last, I'm going to say 10 to 15 years, like the USA roster has deepened a lot more just in terms of it's less top heavy than it used to be. It used to be Patrick Kane was the best guy, and then they didn't have the Kachucks. They didn't have that kind of that kind of support there. And now they really do. Like, it's a very, very deep roster. So I don't really know if they're going to select two undersized Montreal Canadiens, but I think that if either of them is closer than the other, it is going to be Lane Hutson. I do believe, though, that in the moments that they haven't taken Cole Caufield to international tournaments, they've regretted it. And if they've taken him and used him incorrectly, they've regretted it. So for me, it really is a situation where I think that if anyone's going to get snubbed, it's going to be more Cole Caufield than Lane Hutson.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Lane Hudson starts the season on fire and Adam Fox in New York doesn't, and maybe that's his ticket onto that team.
Yeah.
Because he's not replacing like a Jacob Slavin like type. He's not playing that kind of game. It's sort of a player in, player out of that archetype. You would need a Lane Hudson-esque player coming out, and the only one that matches that profile would be an Adam Fox, who had a down year for New York this year, and we'll see how he rebounds. But yeah, I think Caufield should make the team and probably won't, just based on the politics that surround that and how that team wants to play and get beat by Canada anyway. All right, we'll leave the Olympics there for now. There will be more announcements before the end of the year for what the full rosters will be. So we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the rest of the beginning of the regular season. But when we come back, it's draft season. We're headed into our draft prep. We're going to take a look at some candidates for slides, both as forwards and defensemen, and try to figure out if they will be in the Montreal Canadiens range. We'll get into that in just a minute. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety, whether I'm at my desk or I'm on the road. It's a perfect grab and go snack for those days where I just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to. Especially, I like the different varieties of no-shell pistachios like sea salt and vinegar or the chili roasted. And if you love cracking into every shell for that satisfying crunch, don't worry, they have not forgotten about you. The in-shell options are always a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, my friend, we are back. We are going to talk about some draft guys. We are delving into the boy auction, as it's called, which I love. It's so accurate. It's really all it is. I think every time this time of year, we forget that all of these guys are 17 and 18 years old, and we could all be given a reminder that they are legitimate children, despite the fact that some of them walk up on stage looking like actual trees. All right, let's start. Let's go through some guys. We'll spend this segment on some forwards that I'm targeting and are targeting, but mostly want to discuss, and then we'll talk about defensemen in a second. Now, the basis for this conversation is the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, the 2025 Elite Prospects Draft Guide. It is behind a paywall, so we're going to be careful about the information that we share with you guys. However, if you love the draft, if you want to know more about these players, I cannot think of a place for you to spend your money that would give you more information. The Elite Prospects Draft Guide is fantastic. They're all great people. We really enjoy delving into that guide. And it just helps, the lay people like us who don't get to watch all these guys all the time understand why these prospects are ranked where they are. Now, these are prospects that the Elite Prospect rankings have within the Habs range. So 16, 17, if they fall in that range, we will try to discuss them. I will say that range or these rankings does not match a direct mock draft. So we will be talking about players who they have ranked in the teens who will probably go top 5. And that's just sort of how this goes. So this is not meant to be a mock draft just yet. I'm sure at the Locked On NHL channel, we will be doing mock drafts, I would imagine, throughout the summer.
Yes.
But let's start here with forwards. The first one I have listed here is Jake O'Brien. On Elite Prospects, they have him ranked 10th. He shoots right, center, 6 foot, almost 2, 172 pounds. He played in Brantford of the OHL last year, 66 games played, 32 goals, 66 assists. Elite Prospects, the range they have for him is 6 to 16. So it's quite a big range for this player. He's an obvious passer and playmaker. They said what I found interesting, passing is his first, second, and third play. Like, this guy is just thinking pass the entire way, which is funny because he scored 32 goals. The problem is I think that leads a lot of people to think that he doesn't have a diversity of game. He's very one-dimensional, and I think that's why he might slide. He still needs to fill out physically a little bit. Does a pure playmaker who doesn't really seem to be doing anything else fit what the Canadiens would want to be adding to this team?
Honestly, I think they will be tantalized by that aspect of it, right? Personally, for me, like we talk a lot about it, our commenters talk a lot about it. Like they don't want to accumulate any more small people. But I feel like oftentimes when there are players that have that kind of range among different scouts and among different opinions, like for me personally, I think it's that there's probably like one aspect of their game that is so incredibly tantalizing that pushes them forward. And I personally feel like if we talked about it yesterday, the Canadians should try to get somebody who's a surefire NHLer and then swing for the fences. Like to me, this is not the guy to swing for the fences, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you would need to pair a player like this with a legitimate goal scorer, which he
Yeah.
had in Brantford. Well, excuse me, I cannot remember his line mate's name, but his line mate had 70 goals this year. So is it the tail wagging the dog here? That is creating this. There is also some doubts about whether or not he can fill out physically, and that will kind of round out the rest of his game. And also, if the plays he was taking advantage of at the OHL level will be available at the NHL level. There's some legitimate doubt there. I think, if the Canadians, if he were to slide to them, it would be difficult for them to pass. However, I think the lack of physicality in his game and size. I know he said he's 6'2", but he's 172 pounds. Like he's very slender. I think that they would find a hard time figuring out how he plays into their team. Now that doesn't mean you don't pick a guy like that, because especially where the Canadians are headed, maybe that's a trade chip later on, right? Like you watch him develop another season in the OHL, he puts up monster numbers, and all of a sudden his stock is super high, and you could trade him for a legitimate NHL player. So those are things to consider as well. All right. The next guy on my list is the reason I gave the giant disclaimer at the beginning about the rankings not matching with the reality of how the draft will play out. And to be fair to elite prospects, I don't think that's their goal. Their goal here is not to make a mock draft. That's why they do mock drafts separately. This player is ranked 13th in their draft guide, and it is Anton Frundell, who by all metrics looks like he's going to be a top 5 pick, at least a top 10 pick. The fact that he's listed at 13th here, Elite Prospects has his range anywhere from 8 to 18 on their rankings. 6'1", 198 pounds. The quote was built like a tank, and with those stats, you can see it. They love his shot. Very, very good shot. One of the best in the draft. He had a great D-1 season. His draft year was very injury plagued, and he had a hard time staying healthy. Didn't make the World Juniors team. But it's tantalizing because he plays a lot of the game, a lot of the ways that Montreal wants to. He's very physical. He plays well on the boards. He gets the puck to the middle, and he has a great shot. Like, there's no way this player gets to Montreal, right? Like, they would have to trade up if they want this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like just the completeness of this, because I think a lot of times, like when you're looking at players, like they need to be able to bring a lot of things, and just everything you just said, I was like, he's definitely going to get snapped up way before 16.
Yeah, I really have a hard time thinking he gets there. There's always guys that slide on draft day. I just have a hard time believing it's a guy with that profile, that size, that play type, that shot. I just have a really tough time believing he gets anywhere near the Canadians at 16.
Yeah.
Last guy I want to talk about is a guy who I believe will be available for Montreal at 16, and it's just a matter of whether or not they want him. This is Braden Coots, right-hand shot center. I don't think I wrote his height. He's 5'11" and a quarter, 183 pounds. Elite Prospects range has him from 12 to 19. He's playing in Seattle in the Western Hockey League. I laughed at the trait that they gave him, which is got that dog in him. I think I mentioned that on yesterday's show. Very much excited by that. This is a guy who just has an incredible motor. We talked about Vincent Aurora having a motor. This is what, another player of that sort of dimension. He has skill at speed. He's a puck retrieval machine, but there are always concerns about a guy that plays that way who's under 6 foot. The fact that he plays the way the Canadians want him to, though, does that change their way of thinking about him? Because he is small, but do they think, yeah, but he plays like that, we can have that guy?
So I think that this time around, they're going to shy away from those small players in the first couple of rounds. I just feel like if there's going to be a small guy, it's going to be way later because of all the criticism that they receive, because of the way that they've kind of they seem to have absorbed that messaging about size, right? We talked about the players that they're rumored to be interested in. There's a lot of physicality there. There's a lot of size there. So I feel like anything that doesn't begin with a 6 is automatically like off the Canadiens board for the first couple of rounds. Like the more likely to make the NHL caliber.
I think if there is a player, I talked about this yesterday, the kind of small player who teams pass on and then they go, oh, we shouldn't have passed on that guy because then he makes the NHL and he's really good. This guy seems to have not only the type of skills that make you successful at the NHL level, but the type of game in general, like the fearlessness, the motor. They did love his energy and his brain, the way he thinks the game. I think if his number started with the 6, the Canadiens would sprint up to the podium to make this pick. Even though it's a remote draft, they'd probably just start running from Montreal immediately. I just think that you're right. The size concerns might be too much, and they might decide to pass on that guy at that spot. Or maybe they take, they go with the safer option there, a different guy at 16, and they go, well, he's still there. Why don't we take a swing on him? That maybe is a guy you take a home run swing on. So really interesting options. We're not done talking about the forwards overall in this year's draft. We'll get back into them, especially those who are ranked close to the first round. So we'll be covering those throughout the summer or throughout the next couple of weeks before the draft. But when we come back, it's time to talk about some defensemen. There are some really good defensemen in the Canadiens range, and we'll see if they have any shot of getting to Montreal when we come back. All right, we are back. And we're back with a gigantic defenseman, Laura. This is Radam Ritka of Czechia. He also played for Seattle of the Western Hockey League. 6'5" 3/4", so almost 6'6", 207 pounds. He is 15th on the Elite Prospects draft board. He is projected to go anywhere from 12 to 17. Or I should say he's 12 to 17 in the rankings. I have to curb that because they have him in the mock draft much higher. Because of the reason I started with this player is because he's massive and he shoots right. And those guys are always at a premium in the National Hockey League. Play killer, vision, motor are the traits that he was given. He was voted as the best shutdown D in the draft. Active and aware defender. He transitions well with his feet and passing. He's not overly physical for a guy of that size, though. Are you at all worried about taking a defenseman that large who doesn't seem to play all that physically?
I don't think so because they have complementary players to that. I do think the right shot is tempting. I think the size is tempting, but the problem is that you can't teach physicality, right? You can try, but players who aren't overly physical at this stage in their game, I don't think it's going to increase. Like you can teach people to get hit, but I don't know that you can teach people to be more physically imposing. But I do think though, like whatever you were saying, I just felt like there's probably a good chance the Montreal Canadiens are interested in this guy and they're looking at him.
Yeah. I giant right shot defenseman. I have a really hard time believing he gets to 15, let alone 16 and 17. Like I think he's an early teens if he even makes it out of the top 10. Like teams fall over themselves to draft guys like this. Because yes, it's a trope that these guys love size. They want really big defensemen, regardless of whether or not they can move the puck or skate. It seems like he's pretty decent at those things too. But it's true for a reason, right? Like these teams go after these guys because they're constantly in demand in the NHL. Every team wants this prototype of player. I think Montreal, again, this is a guy that if he were to get to 16, they're falling over themselves to go pick. I have a hard time believing that he gets there just because, yes, Elite Prospects has him ranked, within this range. But again, teams only have one pick in the first round. Sometimes they'll take a reach on a guy just to make sure they get him. And I think that's kind of what we'll see here. All right, next one is Logan Hensler, 17th on Elite Prospects. He's a right shot D, 6'2" 1/4", 192 pounds. The EP range here is 14 to 21. So well within the Canadiens, if things were to work out this way exactly, this seems like a guy who could fall to Montreal. Play killer, toolsy, versatility are the traits that they listed. The big thing that I took away from reading his draft profile is just how much he improved over the course of his freshman year at Wisconsin. He's in the NCAA. There are some things that he has to work out defending, at the speed that the NCAA has played was a challenge. But it does seem like this is a guy who can improve in a meaningful way. This seems like if you miss out on Mrtka, you're going for a guy like this. He's not as big, yes, but that's a right shot D again. Like it's a trope every year for a reason. Like these guys are hard to find. Does this player profile, does it excite you in a way that the Canadiens would be happy to take him?
I feel like at 16 or 17, there's not that much excitement to be had, to be honest.
Sure.
Like we're kind of in that range where we hope the guy is a bona fide NHLer, right? So I think that it does make sense. This team really does love its NCAA guys. And I think the really key thing is what you pointed out is the improvement, because that's the kind of player that Marty likes to work with, right? For me, I think that's the biggest element of all of this is that can the Montreal Canadiens develop this person? Development was a weak spot before. Drafting, I don't know, was very hit or miss before, but now they have all the elements in place to optimize a player's development when they get them. So I do feel encouraged by the idea. It's just like none of these guys really grip me in the way that like a top 5 pick would, right? Like last year was so exciting because there was a chance that they could develop, they could draft Demidov, and then they actually did, right? Like the way that things shake out. Like in this case, like what we're tantalized and excited by is the possibility of them trading these guys, trading these picks, not these guys, right? So I do feel though that it does make sense. Like I said, they love their NCAA guys. Marty loves like a person he can improve. Like the team itself is really set up for development now. It does make sense that they would do that.
Yeah. And to your point, like and this is a big knock on this year's draft class. There's definitely NHL talent to be had, but the projectability is difficult for a lot of these guys. They're having a hard time understanding, can they do what they're doing in junior at the NHL level, which is always a challenge. But it seems like this year, especially, there's a big drop off from the elite talent in this year's draft. Like there's probably 3, maybe 4 guys at the top. And then there's a big drop off, and then there's a big drop off after that. Like there's sort of this draft will go in tiers, and it's just a matter of seeing who slides. The last guy on D I want to talk about is a guy who Elite Prospects has ranked 18th, a left shot defenseman, 6'1.5", 196 pounds. The range that they have for him is 14 to 21. It's Kashawn Aitchison. They list the comp that they had, the shades of comp that they had, was Jacob Trouba with a one-timer. That sounds horrifying, Laura. Doesn't that sound like just something every team is looking for?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe a little bit less murder, and just a little bit more one-timer, I think, is probably the best comparison that I would want. I think that this is the kind of guy that people feel that teams like Montreal should take. I don't know that he's my favorite option, but it is something that's really horrifying to play against. It's something that's going to be tough to play against, and I think the Montreal Canadiens will fall for that aspect of it.
I think they would if there was a shot he gets to them, which I don't think there is. I think this is a guy who has the skill set and the just raw tools that there's if he gets to 12, I'm shocked. Like I just think that this guy, he has everything that NHL players or NHL general managers and scouting offices want.
Right.
He's listed as a freight train. He hunts for big hits. He's a clinical finisher is another trait that they listed for him. Like he can score and beat guys up. It just seems like, doesn't it seem like if you're trying to draft to beat the Florida Panthers, that's a guy you would take?
Yeah. But the problem is, by the time this guy makes the NHL, are the Florida Panthers the team to beat at that time?
Yeah. Brad Marchand probably won't even be playing, or at least you would hope he's not playing at the level he's been playing. Hey, this is just our first stop at looking at our draft profiles. If there are prospects that you guys want us to talk about and learn more about, sound off in the comments. We'll do our best to educate ourselves on these guys. We're also going to talk to people that we know in the space, especially after the draft, to get an idea of how the Canadiens did things. The sort of holes in their prospect pools that they addressed and others that may need to be addressed in the future. All right, let's do our trivia and then head out of here for today.
Can we do
So
two
yes-
plugs first?
Yeah, go for it.
I just want to repeat or reiterate everything that you said about the EP draft guide. It is definitely like it. I know I get a lot of criticism sometimes for like looking at notes and stuff. That's what I was looking at throughout this episode. Like it's literally like that's how we educate ourselves as EP. Like they give us so much, like and it's really worth paying for. So definitely do that. And the other one is our friends at Locked On Sharks. JD does a really good job of rounding up a lot of draft experts. We are not picking in the same ranges this year as the Sharks are, but he really does have some really great guests on, which we will hopefully have on as well to do some draft recapping after. Definitely check out Locked On Sharks.
Co-signed. Absolutely. That's JD's great, as much as it makes me want to puke to say that. He's a great dude. All right, let's do today's trivia question. When was the last time the Canadiens had 6 picks in a draft, all play NHL games? Do you remember the answer to this one, Laura?
Our listeners all said 2004, but I did not fact check them.
That is correct. It was the 2004 draft. They had 6 guys play NHL games in that draft, although very few of them were played actually with the Montreal Canadiens. I should say very few players actually played with the Montreal Canadiens. We had Kyle Chipchura, Alexei Emelin, JT Wyman, Mikhail Grabovski, Greg Stewart, and in the 9th round with the most games by far, Mark Streit. Also coming from Zurich SC, which is where Vincent Rohrer was playing. So there's your tie-in with yesterday's episode. The question was answered correctly by David Waddy, Paul Kev 8288, Super Rain, and Jeff Harple. So thank you guys for playing along and for always getting our trivia questions right. All right. Since we're talking about the Canadiens picking 16th and 17th, here's today's question. When was the last time the Montreal Canadiens picked with 2 consecutive picks in the first round? So when was the last time Montreal had back-to-back picks in the first round and they picked players with them? If you have the answer, put it in the comments down below. Let us know how smart you are, and we'll give you a shout-out on the next episode of the show. And that's going to do it for us today on this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day, and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports us here at the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no off-season there, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most, with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available on Amazon Fire TV. On your free Fire TV channels app, click the Montreal Canadiens logo in the hockey section, and you can watch all of our episodes there as well. We are on the internet, everywhere we're posting things at Locked On Canadiens, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok mainly, and also as well here on YouTube, posting our shorts if you are interested in seeing those. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys tomorrow.